welcome you to our 2021 National Budget Reflective Meeting. My name is Love Mo Kadenge. I will be your facilitator this morning. You will be given programs fairly soon. I'm past president of the Zimbabwe Economic Society, but I'm also still in council, and I see my fellow council member, Dr. Mashagada, here. And also at the same time, I'm a past president of the CIS, that's Chartered Institute of Secretaries. So the issue of budget and governance is really of interest to me. And some of you may know that around 2000, during that period, we used to have a lot of discussions. And when I was working for the Frederick Ebert Foundation, capacity building, workshops and seminar, in particular with the budget and finance committees in Parliament. So I'm at home. Thank you. So at this stage, we are running a bit behind. We should have started it at 8:30, but I wish to welcome the honorable members of Parliament here, including the chairman of the Budget Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Budget, Finance and Economic Development, Honorable Mona. And I also want to recognize Honorable Kupe, the leader of the opposition in Parliament, and members of the civic society, and everyone here. And we hope that we will have a very fruitful discussion. My role is to ensure that we keep time, but we have to make sure that nearly everyone was here for this workshop. At this stage, I wish to ask the director of Zimcod, Janet Jo, to come and welcome us. But before Janet comes in, we are in this COVID environment. And so I wish to insist that all of us must make sure that there is social distances and there's also sanitizers where we are. So let's ensure that we keep our safety there. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Mr. Kadenge. A very good morning to you all, and welcome to our honorable members of Parliament who are here present. The chairperson of the Budget, Finance and Economic Development Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, Honorable Felix Mona, Leader of Opposition in Parliament, Honorable Thokozani Kupe. Welcome. We are really glad to have you here, and we truly appreciate your setting aside time. Every time we call on you to have discussions to do with public finance management, you have been very kind to us to accept our invitations for us to have dialogue, for us to have conversations in terms of the role of the citizens and the role of Parliament in public finance management and ensuring that there is transparency and accountability in public finance management. I was just thinking, I think in the past month, we have been together almost every week in different spaces, either for capacity building or for dialogue, for strategic planning processes and the like. And we really appreciate that you have accepted Zimcod as a partner with Parliament in terms of building the agency of the Parliament and also the agency for the citizens. We met here when the budget strategy paper was presented by the Minister of Finance, and we went through it and shared with you the analysis of that budget strategy paper. We shared in terms of the citizens' expectations from the consultations that you had done as a committee, and also the pre-budget seminars that we had done from the civil society perspective. And from what we had picked, there was resonance between Parliament and civil society in terms of what the 2021 budget has to address. I'm glad that Parliament has what they call the People's Budget document, which is actually what we went out with when we were also doing our pre-budget seminars with the different communities where Zimcod operates. And you did the same in the consultations, despite the fact that the budget strategy paper came a bit late, maybe due to the issue of COVID-19. The ministry also had pressure in that regard. But we are glad that we conversed, we agreed on a number of issues in terms of having a people's budget, or what at Zimcod, together with our coalition members, we called a people-led budget. And this budget was supposed to address the issue of unlocking the power of government spending to respond to COVID-19, to the COVID-19 pandemic, to grow the economy, to create decent jobs, and to protect the vulnerable, particularly the elderly and people with disabilities. We agreed and we shared with you that we would want a 2021 budget that gives children and youths of Zimbabwe a chance to make it in life. And this was going to be through, say, for example, the Universal Basic Income Grant, issues of free early childhood development in rural and peri-urban areas, school feeding programs, noting that about 7.7 million people in Zimbabwe are food insecure. We shared with you, members of parliament, that we would want to eliminate gender-based inequalities and empower women and young girls by increasing support towards the different sectors where these are found. In short, we're saying we want a very gender-responsive 2021 budget. We said that we would want to see how the budget is going to facilitate women and young girls' participation, or young women's participation in the $12 billion mining industry that the government is talking about and targeting by 2023. We said we'd want to see women and girls having equitable access to potable water, sanitation, renewable energy, legal justice, health, and education services. We shared with you that we would want to safeguard the nation's health, and would want to see about 15% of the total budget going towards public health service delivery and establishing of a universal health insurance scheme. We also shared with you in that meeting that we would want to see economic stimulus packages going to small and medium enterprises, support to the informal economy through inclusive financing and income substitution to help local SMEs, smallholder farmers, transport operators, vendors, cross-border traders associations, artisanal small-scale miners, to recover from the losses that they incurred during the lockdown period. If you remember well, we also shared that we'd want to see a Zimbabwe that is free from debt bondage through a sustainable public debt management framework that would, and concrete measures to protect Zimbabwe households from unfair, abusive, and predatory lending practices by private lenders. We all know they are private lenders due to the economy, to the economic hardships, and some of them are abusive lenders. To the small-scale traders, to households, they make it seem easy, but at the end of the day, when they come after their money, it's really abusive. So we wanted financial inclusion through formal channels. We agreed with you that we would want to see the devolution agenda being given priority in the 2021 budget, and unlocking the economic power and authority, reform of the public sector, and giving the Zimbabwe servants fair remuneration and a dignified standard of living. We also spoke about domestic resource mobilization and operationalization of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which Zimbabwe committed to in 2014 through an act of parliament. We said that we'll establish a Sovereign Wealth Fund and we'll fund it and operationalize it so that we can distribute the proceeds from the natural resource sector that we get. We also spoke about the diaspora, that it is time for us to reflect on the role of the diaspora beyond the remittances. How are we going to ensure that they invest back home and they can help and assist in the in growing our economy. We also spoke about funding and resourcing, oversight and constitutional institutions or safeguards, such as the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, Parliament itself being an oversight body and the like. This is what we spoke about when we met the paper, and we are meeting when the minister presented his 2021 national budget to reflect on that. Makadenge was asking me, why are we saying it's a reflective? Then we said, we met before and we spoke about these issues. So we want to reflect and see whether the budget addressed some of these issues, or was it moderate? Was it brave enough to really give to the different sectors that were particularly affected by the crisis that we are in, the COVID-19. So I welcome you to this reflective meeting. I'm definitely sure that it's going to be successful because we have a baseline, we have somewhere to start off from in terms of our discussions and our deliberations, because we met before, and like I said, there was resonance in terms of what you wanted as Parliament, what you were pushing for as Parliament, and also as a committee, and what we were saying as civil society. I thank you once again, and I say we have broken the barrier of atomization, where we work in silos, where we treat our Parliament with suspicion, and our civil society and our citizens with suspicion. We have broken that barrier, we have found each other, we are speaking to each other, and let us continue with that culture. As Zimbabweans, we speak to each other, we sit around our indabas, and we talk about our issues, and we map the way forward together. I thank you, and I wish us all well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet, for those welcome remarks. I hope by now everyone has got a copy of our program for today. So just spend a few minutes looking at the objectives of our workshop. I have 3 key objectives which I have in mind, and we can also share from you what you expect. One is a thorough appreciation and understanding of the 2021 national budget. Then the second is look at its implications. And thirdly, its social impact. Since, as mentioned, you were involved as stakeholders in the initial participation of the preparation of the budget itself, and the budget was presented, and now the idea is to look at the budget, and as parliamentarians, I'm hoping that each participant should be able to discuss the budget with anyone and give clarity after this morning session, because I'm sure in your various constituencies, the electorate and different members would want to find out what the budget entails. And that's why this is very critical, and we thank Zimcod in this whole participation for you to be able to make meaningful contribution in Parliament. You need to understand what the issues are. And I'm hoping at the end of this half day, all of us, feel free to ask any questions. I think this is the forum. I remember one time when we were in Nyanga with parliamentarians sometime in 2000, and we had this 3-day workshop looking at the debt situation itself. And we had these professors giving presentations. And I could tell that they were talking about the legislators, the civic society organizations, and so forth. And we posed the question. And I'm saying that this is the forum. Don't feel shy. If you don't understand some things, you seek clarity. I think that's why we are here. And I'm sure once the presentation is made by our main presenter and the discussants, we need all of us to participate in this debate. And as I say, ask any question, you can stop at any moment, but I would prefer that we follow our program. And my job is to keep time. And then so briefly, maybe just one or two interventions from you as participants. What are your expectations beside what I've said? Is there anyone with a different view, expectation for today?
Honorable members in our midst, our distinguished facilitators, development partners, thank you very much for the presentation, detailed presentation by Dr. Bayai. I think what is of paramount importance is to understand the sense of being a discussant. I'm glad that you highlighted that we are not going to be making presentations, but looking into the presentation that was before us. And I want to thank Dr. Bayai for articulating very well the issues that emanated from our 2021 budget. And I'll actually touch on one or two, three issues that were very topical in his presentation, and also try to understand some of the issues that he then raised. I'm just trying to figure out where is Dr. Bayai? Oh yeah, they, okay. Maybe just to seek clarity, you talked about the 20% when you talked about the agricultural sector as the benchmark. But we also have the Dakar. I don't know whether you've also compared with Dakar that states that the issues of education, and also have the issue of Maputo Declaration, I think to be precise, relating to the agriculture that you talked about, where it was agreed that 10% has to go towards agriculture. So I wanted you to also marry together with the Maputo Declaration in particular, when it comes to benchmarking the issues of budgets, allocations vis-a-vis the GDP. So I thought maybe we'll need to interrogate on that one, where we thought the minister had almost allocated about 10.9, which is almost 11% when it comes to agricultural funding. But you raised very important issues as the enablers of our economy, the anchors of this economy, when you talked about agriculture, mining, tourism, and manufacturing. And as a committee, when we're soliciting views from the public, these were also very topical in terms of the consultations, where the people that we consulted were very clear when it comes to their priority areas. And if you looked at the figures that were allocated, especially to agriculture, to us in terms of the benchmark, we thought, yes, the allocations were more than the Maputo Declaration. When we actually highlighted the issues of health, we said, yes, this time the minister started on 12.9, gravitating towards the 15% Abuja Declaration, which we think if we start debating on the budget, we'll actually have maybe 1 or 2 percentage points towards that mark. And when you look at the education sector, which the minister allocated almost 18%. So to us, in terms of allocations, that was very important. But you then raised a very important point that I want to draw my discussion on when it comes to the budget as a committee. As we then superintend over this budget, is it merely allocating? What then happens after the allocation is something that you then posed, and to this committee in particular. The question is on the budget funds distribution and administration, where we are found lacking in terms of how then do we do the tracking, how then do we report. But you then raised a very important point when it comes to the feedback on use of funds to the public, which I think we can discuss the figures that were allocated in this August House. But remember, a budget, this is an estimate. And the minister has to run around and procure those funds. so that you then meet the expenditure that would they have been forecasted. So at the end of the day, we are saying, yes, the 421 billion, vis-a-vis someone was saying, if you then go back 2.5 years, those who remember our budget was hovering around 4 billion to 5 billion. And if you then say what was then achieved under the 4 to 5 billion, vis-a-vis the 421 billion, is it an indicator that the economy has grown? If we could do with 4 to 5 billion 2.5 years ago, now we've got a 421 billion budget. What does that mean? Which then calls for the committee to interrogate, to say, yes, in US terms, if we remember the 4 billion was 1:1, and those who do their math, if you then say 421 against the auction rate, what is it that we are getting now? So the comparison in terms of real value, are we worse off or we are in a better position? So these are the issues that we then need to interrogate. But what I wanted to advise and also promise this August House is, as a committee, I think this year we did something differently, whereby each committee would go out and solicit views. But here we had one that you would see written as Budget, Finance and Economic Development Committee and expanded SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals Committee, whereby we were saying the chairpersons of various committees will constitute this other bigger committee, and also our chief whips in that bigger committee, whereby we would then table a consolidated report, which we then did during the pre-budget seminar. And the question also came into being that, how then do we go back to the people to say, because this was the question that was always being raised by the masses. You come here, you solicit for views, the budget is tabled, and you don't come back to us to feedback. So I'm glad you raised the point of feedback on use of funds, which is something that we then need to add. But if you look, we've got what we call citizen budget, where we would then tell the budgetary process to the people from the formulation until to the audit stage. But we are saying, as we then move into this coming year, we'll then go back as a committee, as that bigger committee, back to the people to say, out of the 100 points that you wanted included in the budget, 50 were captured, 50 were not. And then we proffer reasons why the other submissions were taken on board. And together, I'm glad that the committee is here as well, the feedback on the use of funds, so that we then track, for instance, quarterly, to say in terms of the disbursements, 1.4 billion was supposed to go to the mines, and only 200 million has been allocated so far, vis-a-vis a target of 400. So what we are going to be doing basically is then to marry and also interrogate the disbursements, which is the very important point that we also need. Being allocated, the money are two different things. So I think as a committee, this is a welcome move that you have highlighted, Dr. Bayai. And on the framework of tracking, I'm glad the civil society, you are here, and you have been facilitating some of these workshops. It will be very important to then come up with a model where we would agree to say, how then do we expedite the tracking system? What are the benchmarks? What are we looking when we say we are tracking? So this is something that will also work very closely with the civil society, trying to come up with a framework that we then adopt as a committee to track, which is very important. You would hear someone saying, yes, a certain ministry was allocated 1 billion and there was no appetite to take that. Is it true, or the disbursement wasn't done on time? So these are the issues that we also need. Not only that, but the outcomes of that funding in terms of proper use. Has it been channeled? I can just give you an example where we were given a loan by China towards the treatment plant here in Zimbabwe, and the funds ended up buying vehicles, for those who remember the 144 million some years ago. So these are the issues that we would want to track as a committee. So I think instead of just talking about the figures, we also need to make sure that when the budget has been tabled, we are in a position to interrogate, we are in a position to follow through the disbursements, and know that quarterly we are getting the reports from the line ministries.
At this stage, I will ask Dr. Shtambara to come up and make his presentation.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, but also, Dr. Shtambara, you remember some questions which I posed earlier before tea, which, of course, you tried to answer, Doctor, but you are also free, you as discussants, to also assist him.
What was that one?
Answering
what were the questions, by the way? Okay, but anyway,
you are not in.
I'll remember.
Okay.
So let me start also by thanking my colleague, the esteemed scholar, for a very, very comprehensive presentation on the 2021 National Budget Analysis. So what I'm just going to do, I'm not going to do another presentation, but probably to highlight some of the key issues and also maybe try to buttress those issues. I think I would agree with you in terms of the inadequacies of the tax relief measures, especially with respect to our tax-free threshold, which has been adjusted from 5,000 to 10,000 beginning next year. So of course, we would have thought that at least that would have been set at least the poverty datum line, which is at September 2020 is around 17,900. So I think that's an issue that's of concern. Then also in terms of, I will probably end with the budget allocations. I've done a bit of numbers, but before I go there, let me look at the institutional reforms. I believe institutional reforms are very, very critical for the success of the budget, for the success even of the national development strategy. So I think we need to be focusing a lot on institutional reforms with respect to, for example, our doing business reform agenda. I think the environment still remains very, very challenging. When you look at how we are doing, yes, we have made significant improvements over the past few years, but I think the main story emerging from the global competitiveness report by the World Economic Forum and also the ease of doing business reform surveys by the World Bank is that Zimbabwe remains a very, very challenging environment for doing business. And I think that also explains why our numbers in terms of foreign direct investment inflows have actually been on a downward trajectory for the past 3 years. So I agree with the emphasis by the minister on harnessing the digital economy as a way of simplifying the doing business environment, for example, through e-commerce, e-government, allowing businesses to get licenses electronically. When you look at our numbers in terms of the average number of days to get a business license, we are still at around 30 days. And that's still a lot when you compare with our regional competitors like Zambia. Zambia, they're at about 7. And investors have to undergo about 9 procedures, different procedures to get a business license. And that's still a lot. So the digital economy could actually help to ease the doing business environment and also address issues of corruption. Because one major concern from investors is that they are always asked for maybe bribes by bureaucrats before they can actually get a business license. So through the digital economy, we could actually address those issues of corruption, and that could also help to reduce the doing business, the cost of doing business, and simplify the doing business environment. I think also another positive from the national budget has to do with the mainstreaming, obviously, of the budget to the national development strategy, and also the minister has come up with clear targets with respect to employment creation, for example, and also with respect to poverty reduction. Our biggest labor market challenge in Zimbabwe is the high levels of informal employment. So according to the 2019 Labor Force and Child Labor Survey from Zimcod, 75.6% of our labor, of our employment is actually informal. And our unemployment numbers, they are, like the presenter said, 16.4%. So those numbers obviously don't reflect the huge labor market challenges that we actually have. So we have been creating jobs, but those jobs are informal. So there are a lot of decent work deficits, and the prevalence of the working poor is actually high within the informal. And obviously also the informal contributes about 60% of our gross domestic products. It presents a challenge, obviously, which the minister is trying to plug, but it also presents an opportunity. If we could sustainably transition that informality to formality through incentives. Now, maybe related to that, let me touch on the presumptive tax structure that's been unveiled by the minister. I think my view basically is that it appears to be punitive and onerous, especially given the fact that most of the guys in the informal economy are actually struggling, and they were adversely affected by the COVID-19 induced lockdowns. They suffered huge losses. And so a lot of them actually are struggling they are living from hand to mouth. So the informal economy in Zimbabwe really, it's a survivalist sector. So I think what's needed probably is to come up with incentives, simplify the tax regime, and even reduce the number of tax aids and taxes, so that you reduce the cost of compliance with formalization. Because one reason why businesses sometimes prefer to go formal or to remain formal is to do with the high levels of taxation, the onerous and the burdensome levels of taxation. We saw it in the DRC. In the DRC, I think in the mid-2000s, they came up with a battery of taxes trying to target the informal economy. But what that then did was that it drove most of these businesses further and further into the underground economy. So we don't want to drive these guys more and more into the underground. We need to be capacitating them and facilitating their transitioning from informality to formality. Another issue that's also important is the issue of domestic savings. I think the minister also talked about this. Domestic savings, I think, going forward will be very, very critical to finance investments. When you look at our current financing model, it's not very, very sustainable. It's also not well diversified. In some critical sectors like health, we are having to rely overly on external financing or on donors. So I think the issue of domestic savings, and we hope that the macroeconomic stability is going to be entrenched even further, so that at least that could incentivize the mobilization of domestic savings. And the capacitation and full operationalization of the Sovereign Wealth Fund then becomes very, very critical as a way of mobilizing domestic savings. When you look at countries that are doing well, in Asia, for example, their domestic savings to GDP average is around between 30 and 35%. In Zimbabwe, for a long time, our domestic savings to GDP were actually negative, meaning that we are, number one, highly consumption-driven, oriented, and number two, we even have sometimes to incur indebtedness to finance our huge and insatiable appetite for consumption. So domestic savings be very, very critical. We need to up our domestic savings, but obviously stability is very, very critical to do that. So the issue of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, I think, is very, very critical, must be capacitated. And in fact, that's one of the key lessons that we saw emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic, that countries that had huge savings, huge sovereign wealth funds, were actually able to draw down reserves from those funds to finance their COVID-19 response. We saw it in Norway. We saw it in the Arab states, and also in Singapore. Then I also agree with the minister with respect to the increase in the sin taxes or so-called corrective taxes. I think, in my view, that's very, very positive. I think that's now the international best practice. That's in line with international best practice. But what's, I think, important now is to make sure that we ring-fence these funds so that at least we support the critical social sectors, especially health. I think our health sector is really in the doldrums, especially when you look at our key health outcomes like maternal mortality, like even infant mortality. We are not doing very well. I think we are the least performer in the SADC region. Our maternal mortality is around 462 per every 100,000 live births. And that's not good. No woman must actually be dying whilst giving birth. So we need these resources that are going to be mobilized through the increase in the sin taxes to go towards the public health. That will also help, in my view, to check the growing incidence of non-communicable diseases. So there's a growing rise in non-communicable diseases, and by ring-fencing these resources, it could allocate resources to fight those, and also discourage probably people from smoking, which is directly related rather to the growing rise in non-communicable diseases. Now let me probably look at the budget allocation. Let me just look at health. I want to give you the per capita, per person spend allocation for health for next year. So, as you know, health got 13% of the total budget. Obviously, that's below the Abuja declaration target of 15%. Of course, that's an improvement from around 10.1% this year. But when you look at the per capita numbers, per person allocation, it's actually about 3,670, which is about, when you use the official exchange rate, it comes to about $45 per person. Of course, that's an increase from about $30 per person. But now that's way below the global average. So the global average, according to the World Health Organization, in terms of per capita, not allocation, but per capita spending on health at global level, is about $1,084. And those figures are for 2018. So Zimbabwe, we are at 45, so that's grossly inadequate. So what it actually means is that the burden of financing our healthcare is falling, number one, on external partners. In fact, external partners next year are projected to give us about 495 million towards the health sector financing. And that's way below the approximately 330 million US. If you convert our health budget, our health allocation to US, it's around 330 million. And donors are providing about 495 million. That's up from about the projected 400 million for this year. So my view is that that's not really sustainable. I think we need to gradually be weaning ourselves from relying on donor financing. And also, a greater burden of health financing is falling again on out-of-pocket payments. And what out-of-pocket payments actually does is that it forces many people into poverty. But it means sometimes people may be forced not to seek medical attention, or sometimes they have to take resources that were meant for the schooling of the kids and divert those resources to financing their out-of-pocket health needs. So in terms of, I think, our social, or what we call poverty-reducing sectors, I think we really need to do something, because in the SADC region, I think we are among the least in terms of public investments in critical social sectors like health and education, water and sanitation, as well as social protection. I think social protection, again, also becomes very critical given the high levels of extreme poverty. So for this year, we are projecting that about 40% of Zimbabweans will be in extreme poverty, up from about 34% as at last year. So one of the best ways of fighting extreme poverty is through social protection interventions. So we need also to be prioritizing. Our numbers, our social protection to GDP numbers for next year, they are at about 0.4%. And the international benchmark, or the regional benchmark rather, is at 4.5% of GDP. So I think that's grossly inadequate to address the unfolding social context that we have to grapple with. I think maybe let me just end there for now. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Before you go, Dr. Stambara, in one of your writings, you remember we were discussing the issue of the TSP.
Oh, yeah.
From the figures we were given here, it appears we didn't perform as
Yeah, we didn't do
success
it.
as it is.
Yeah.
Now my question is, you know, one of your writings on the National Development Strategy, you seem to be very positive that we will succeed. And my question is, what gives you that hope? I mean, if previous, you know, some of these programs have not succeeded, what gives you hope that the NDSI will succeed, which was launched by the President on the 16th of November?
So my thinking is that the NDS obviously is much better than the TSP in terms of its broader focus, because the TSP was largely focusing on the macroeconomic aggregates. But with the NDS now, the minister is trying also to focus on the critical social sectors, the critical development sectors. But like for me, in that article, what I was actually arguing is that there are two critical success factors. The first one is the issue of institutions. Once we do institutional reforms, reform our parastatals, reform the doing business environment, I believe we'll be able to lock in or crowd in greater private sector financing, even in critical sectors like infrastructure. And also that could help also to crowd in the diaspora. I think I also advocate for political and economic incentives, and I agree with my brother. The diasporans really need to be incentivized to invest back home. We've seen it happening in other countries. Nigeria, Ethiopia, they've issued infrastructure diaspora bonds to try to crowd in financing from the diaspora. So if we get those two things, the financing and also the institutional reform underpinning the implementation of the NDS, I think the chances of success are much higher. And also the NDS has a clear implementation matrix and results framework. I think that will also help to ensure accountability and to measure its implementation. Thank you.
At this stage, I will ask Dr. Kupe to give comments.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies, the Chairperson of the Budget Committee, Honorable Mona, and Honorable Members of Parliament here present, Zimcod, who made this meeting possible, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by saying, when we talk about the budget, let's not theorize, let's be practical. Because last week, the Minister of Finance presented figures. What is left is for those figures to then translate into a better life for all. Let me define development for you. Development is the ability of a country to satisfy the needs of the people using its own resources. And what are the needs? Food, shelter, health, education, clean water and sanitation, energy, and jobs, amongst other things. So all these things are supposed to be provided by government using its own resources. Today we are talking about the budget. And this budget is supposed to be funded so that at the end of the day, the budget then satisfies the needs of the people. Dr. Bayai spoke about agriculture. And for me, I think it's important that we focus on this economic pillar, agriculture. Because agriculture used to provide employment and income to more than 60% of the population. Agriculture produced 60% of the raw materials required by the manufacturing sector. And it contributed 40% to our foreign currency inflows, which is what Dr. Bayai alluded to earlier on. So if we were to focus on agriculture and make sure that the 42.6 billion allocated to agriculture is used to the maximum, and if possible, let's go to the unallocated reserves and take more money which is supposed to be put towards agriculture. Because if agriculture starts to operate at 100% of its normal productive capacity, it is going to resolve most of our problems. Like we said, it is going to absorb 60% of workers, it is going to create an income for 60%, it is going to produce 60% of raw materials required by the manufacturing sector. What it means is that the manufacturing sector will also start operating. It will produce, it will create employment, it is going to also earn more foreign currency for this country. So most of our problems are going to be resolved if we put all our efforts. And agriculture is going to provide enough food for this country. We must stop importing food from other countries. We must stop that because we've got enough land. Zimbabwe has got 10,000 water bodies, and we have got a capacity of cultivating more than 2 million hectares of land using those 10,000 water bodies. Why are we not investing most of our money into agriculture so that we change, our problems are resolved? The other sector that we must look at is mining. I think what is needed in mining is that we must move away from being primary producers. Let us stop selling raw materials. Let us start selling finished goods. If you look at platinum, for instance, platinum comes out with 10 other minerals: gold, palladium, rhodium, amongst others. But we are selling it as raw. But when it gets to South Africa, when it is processed, they get 10 other minerals. So it means we are getting 10 times less than what we would have gotten if we had processed our platinum so that we sell it as a finished product. If we look at gold, there are so many leakages. And I've been talking about this. Fidelity Printers is buying gold. It used to buy at 55.45. Now I'm told it's buying at 60.40. 60% US dollars, 40% RTGS. This is the reason why people are selling their gold outside the country. They are selling it to other people because there they are getting 100%. So if Fidelity would change to say, now they are buying gold at 100%, you will see Stampede at Fidelity Printers. More gold is going to go into our country. No one who's going to be selling our gold outside the country. All the gold is going to go to Fidelity Printers. Our country is going to generate more money. We will have enough money so that we have our dollar, which is legal tender. Isn't it our dollar is supposed to be backed by gold or something? So we will have enough money to do that. So for me, I think these two pillars are very, very important: agriculture and mining. Let me then talk about the informal sector. If you look at the informal sector, Dr. Bayai said Zimbabwe is highly informalized, with more than 65% of the people in the informal sector being women. But look at the money which was allocated to women, 2.2 billion, 0.5%. And yet women are supposed to access financial support. How much money has been allocated to the Women's Bank? The reason why we advocated for the Women's Bank is because we said when women go to formal banks to borrow money, they are told that they are not credit worthy because they don't have collateral. So we needed a bank which was not going to be asking for collateral. And we got that Women's Bank, but that Women's Bank is not being funded. So where are the women going to get the money from? Women are supposed to get money from that Women's Bank where there is no collateral. And there is proven statistics that if you borrow money to a woman, they will work and repay that money. We've seen it happening in Bangladesh, Grameen Bank, the Sewa Bank in India. It has happened. And this is the reason why I'm saying it is important that the informal sector be funded so that the informal sector moves away from being a supermarket of other countries. Right now, we're a supermarket of South Africa, Botswana, Zambia. Our informal sector is going to South Africa to buy clothes, to buy everything else, and they are selling it here. What is happening? Money is getting out of the country. There is no money which is coming into this country. So money is getting out of the country. The informal sector must be funded so that they start producing mineral water. We're buying mineral water from South Africa. We're buying all these things from South Africa. Why not fund the informal sector so that it starts producing? Once it starts producing, money will remain in this country because we'll be exporting and getting more money from outside the country. The other more important thing has to do with the issue of sanctions. Sanctions, guys, let's talk about them as a country because they are hurting us as a country. Once sanctions are removed, We are able to borrow cheap money from the IMF, from the World Bank, from all these other institutions. This is what we want. But right now, when people are borrowing from outside the country, you are borrowing at high interest rates and so on and so forth. We also want to have corresponding banks outside the country. Right now, because we do not have any corresponding banks outside the country, you can't do business outside the country. So these are some of the things that we must start, looking at. We also want to compete at the world stage, just like any other country, produce, export, get all those incentives where when we are exporting some of their things, we are no longer part of AGOA right now, where we can export things without paying any duty. But Zimbabwe is not part of AGOA. Other African countries are part of AGOA. So it is important that we start talking about this issue, we interrogate it, so that Zimbabwe also starts to operate just like any other country. But in short, honorable members, what I wanted to talk about was that let's be practical when we're talking about the budget. Let's look at the people. The minister presented figures. Those figures must translate into a better life for everyone else. We want this budget to satisfy the needs of the people. The needs of people living with the needs of people with disabilities, needs of elderly, the youths, the women, the orphans, everybody else. Our needs are supposed to be satisfied. People must have jobs, they must have food, they must have shelter, they must have clean water and sanitation, they must have electricity. But this can only happen if, as a country, we start to produce and export. One last issue, domestic resources. Guys, we are a very rich country, which is endowed with enormous resources. And I would like to challenge honorable members of parliament. Let us look at our domestic mineral resources. Look at what Angola did. They took advantage of their oil. They looked for a big investor. He came in, he gave them 15 billion. That investor started extracting the oil for 25, 30 years, or whatever. But they got 15 billion. Go to Angola right now and see where Angola is. And I would like to challenge honorable members of parliament. We have methane gas. We have been talking about this since our time in the trade union movement, but nothing has happened. And we are told it's the finest in the whole world. Let us look for a big investor who is going to come and give us 15 billion, will allow him to extract for 20, 25 years. But this country will have money so that that money is used to make sure that our manufacturing industry starts operating, agriculture starts operating, the mining starts operating. That is when we'll generate more resources so that the needs of the people are satisfied. I'll end here.
Thank you. Before you go, thank you. I have just two questions for you. Thank you very much for your presentations. Yeah. Do our budget figures presented by the minister, do they change after these post-budget workshops? Do they change so that they reflect the contribution which is coming from these things? And then the second point is, do Parliament take note of the Auditor General's report? Because your role is to play an oversight role, and you have an institution like the Auditor General, and every year in, year out, she comes up with the reports which are tabled to Parliament. Do you take it as legislators? Do you take these things seriously?
What I can say is that budgets can change, because I remember that other year we changed the health budget. They had to vary from other ministries. So budgets can change. And we have got the unallocated reserve. That money must be used so that it beefs up where there are shortfalls. And then the other issue was what? The Auditor General, honestly speaking, I think there are shortfalls, in those reports. Reports come to Parliament, but I think we are not putting all efforts in making sure that all the recommendations therein are implemented. What we lack as a country is what I call no action, talk only. We are very good at talking, but we don't act. So what we need to do going forward is, let us talk and then act at the end of the day, because once we start acting, things will change for the good of everybody else. I thank you.
765 billion cubic meters of coal-based methane gas, that is 95% pure. 725 billion cubic meters. 100 million tons of lithium, 30 billion tons of coal, 10 billion tons of ferrochrome, high-grade ferrochrome, the second largest in Africa. A quarter of the world diamonds. The highest land-to-water ratio in Africa. The highest literacy rate in Africa. 13 million tons of gold. 40 different minerals. That is the context that we are operating in. Now, for me, I think we have a fundamental psychodynamic problem. Psychodynamic is when you study the psychology of people and how psychological forces change their behavior or what they think. We have to start there. We are a nation of beggars. A nation that is very rich, but continues to beg. No country ever got rich from FDI. No country ever got rich from the export of primary products. No country ever got rich by ignoring two dividends, the youth dividend and the women dividend. So when you talk about the budget, for me, it's the thinking behind the budget that is critical. And I might add that the minister is responsible for evolutionary change. Evolutionary change is when you try and fix an old system that is no longer working. Revolutionary change is when you change the system to create new results. Every system is designed to create the results that we are getting. Innocent, you spoke about a dual system. A dual system does not create broad-based wealth. So you have to change that system. But in order to change that system, you require new thinking. And to me, that is a fundamental role that I think you as MPs need to instill in the minister. You need to challenge the status quo because the system is not delivering, as Madame Coupe has just said. The fundamental responsibility of any economy is to meet the needs of the people. Social impact. The TSP had 0. Kufio Rainza, sepla sajo Mr. Msewe ino jgiwa here. Haiti batsiri. So any economic system or budget that does not have a social impact, it's really a waste of time. And I am afraid that we are on the wrong trajectory, generally. So we are spending a lot of our time and effort on the wrong things. What is a middle-income country? Every country that has been successful has a leading idea. China is significantly successful. They are very clear. Innovation, technology, defense. America first. What is the leading idea behind the budget? So that the budget is a fulfillment of that leading idea. And currently we don't have that. South Africa is a middle-income country, ladies and gentlemen. Widespread poverty, unemployment, and crime. Tanzania is a middle-income country, ladies and gentlemen. Widespread poverty and crime. So are we aspiring to be a middle-income country with widespread poverty and crime? So we need to be clear on the leading idea of the country. Madam, you talked about agriculture. I'm not going to spend too much time. Innocent, when you started talking about industrialization and transformation, that is what we need to focus on. We need to transform this economy because primary product export leads to low wage incomes. So you might have a lot of people earning very little because we are fairly focusing on primary products. What we have to focus on is industrializing and value addition, right? But that is not going to happen through FDI. Ladies and gentlemen, when these countries come to invest in Zimbabwe, Belarus, China, do you really think they care about you and me at the end of the day? Our mining resources are so huge. I was arguing the other day, we should have a 10% flat rate income tax for companies and individuals. 80% of our budget should be funded from our resources. But we are only getting royalties. So imagine, big investments are done in platinum and lithium, right? For example, 100 million tons of lithium we have. An investor comes in there, we get about 8% royalty, and the 24 tax you're talking about. The rest of the wealth goes outside the country. We as Zimbabweans are not owning our resources. Ato evamwe vanhu vari kuuya kuzoatora voenda nawo kunyika dzavo, isusu tozotenga zvavanenge vagadzira. And if you really look, the fundamental thing, as I'm saying, is the psychology behind who we are as Zimbabweans. We have a poverty mentality. Tinoda kukumbira, asi tinazvo zvinhu zvacho. So what we need is a system that begins to challenge the psychology ya minister yacho yeku allocate. Don't get too involved in the allocations. Those allocations are meaningless. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the industry, it only gets 1.2 billion, but pan is a facility nowhere behind that. So at the end of the day, my allocations are not really reflective of how much we are going to spend on a particular sector. Okay, Innocent, I saw you saying we must, for example, industry. We can have huge facilities behind that 1.2 million. Those huge facilities then allow us to industrialize. So the money I can't see industry, I see the industrialization Iowa. It's just an administrative money, even for SMEs. I think let's get that right. And then the issue of devolution, Innocent, you also manage that. We need total autonomous with provinces, so that provinces can maximize on the effect of endowments. Midlands and Manicaland are two different economies in one country. Bulawayo South and Bulawayo North are two different countries, effectively. I mustn't say that, but what I'm saying is two different economies. So you can't treat them as Harare then decides, so much. Innocent, you mentioned something that we must give equal money. No, we can't do that. We have to look at the profile of each province. What is the poverty? What is the youth? What is women? Let's have a population profile of each, and then we say, what is per capita? We need youth. Then we allocate per capita of youth based on the population, so that we are equalizing poverty, or the poverty reduction. Anditi. Nyaya imwe yandakupedza. Nyaya yemaforena anoya munyika medu achitiudza zvekuita. It must stop. World Bank, IMF has never created a sustainable economy in this world. So we need to rise up and say, number one, we have the resources. Number two, right? Number three, we have the people, the human capital. I was giving an example with gold. If you calculate 13 million tons, it's worth $65 trillion today. $65 trillion today, right? We are mining 30 tons officially per year. How long will it take us to mine 13 million tons? 260,000 years. There's so much gold in this country. We should all have gold and diamonds at the port. You know what I'm saying? So, to me, the psychology, the psychodynamics behind the budget allocation and the budget statement yacho yemunu arikumashure kuti arikufunga chi. As long as we continue on a dual economy, a dependent economy, where we think that revenue must come from individuals, as opposed to create alternative sources of revenue. And we can do that. It's not rocket science. We can raise 50 billion today, right? And sell 30 tons, whatever, 100 tons of gold for the next 5 years. And 50 billion comes today. And so to me, that is more the psychology, Innocent, that we are talking. So I get more excited with the transformation, the industrialization, and the change in mindsets, so that we can create. Let me finish by asking a very personal question. Imimi Sema MP, do you have a say? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vince. I think this is the time we've been waiting for. I see a lot of hands. So what we'll do is, you are not going to be making a presentation. Someone is going to come with a mic. Do you have someone with a mic? Mic, yeah. So, no, I'm the chair. Yeah. So we need to be very brief. And also, you must tell us, who, if it's a question, who are you directing the question to? So is someone going to be moving with the mic? Yeah, but I need someone. The lady will be moving with the mic here. Oh, she left that one. Okay. So I'll start with him. Just identify yourself, please.
Okay. My name is Matthew Nyashanu, Boera Central MP, a member of the Budget Committee. I've got one question. I think it will help all of us. That is, if it's understood in the right context. My question, I will direct it first to Dr. Chitambira, to say, when we say this economy is private sector led, who is this private sector we are talking about? Are we talking about the private sector of those 20 companies whose accounts we froze at some stage? What, are we trusting the social protection of Zimbabweans to the private sector? Because of the fragility of our economy, should we trust the private sector to protect our people? I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you. My name is Msakwa. I'm MP for Bikita West. My question is directed to Dr. Kupe. She spoke passionately about value addition and, improving the value chain, which are, in all intents and purposes, very capital-intensive ventures. Does she have any idea of how this massive capital can be attracted to the country to fund these under the current sanctions regime? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go to the gentleman, Honorable? This Honorable. And then we'll go to...
Okay, my Robas. My question is addressed to...
Can you identify yourself?
Okay, my name is Godfrey Stolle, MP for Chitungwiza North. Okay. And my question, there was a point which was raised by the last presenter pertaining to the issue of the high education standards in Zimbabwe. And also, Dr. Kupe also mentioned issues to do with the rapid development, infrastructure development, which is happening in other countries. So my question is to do with the issue of the number of people who are called, like, for example, it's not a direct attack, but I'm just giving an example. We have so many engineers in Zimbabwe. Then we have basic things which we cannot manufacture, we import. How do you propose a budget can be done, that gap can be bridged between those who are educated and how they can help in terms of infrastructural development? Because if you go around Harare, most of the buildings you see in town, they were built before 1980. But we have so many people called engineer chakat, engineer chakat, and we can't even do basics like kugadzira button repair sheet. We don't even have a company that does that. Kanogadzira toothpick chai, we don't even have a company that does that. Even zippy chai patrols, we don't even have a company that does that. Is there something wrong with our education? I don't know.
Thank you. We'll go to Ahmad Zimure.
Thank you very much. You said Madzimure, is it?
No, you can introduce yourself.
Oh, okay, I'm saying, am I supposed to speak now? Okay. Thank you very much. My first question goes to Dr. Chitambara. Agricultural contribution is 17%. And the people who depend on agriculture, you are saying it's 60 to 70%. But if you look at agriculture, we are importing the basic food. We import maize, we import soybeans for oil, we import wheat. Is this not miscued where you say 17% of the GDP comes from agriculture when you have got such massive deficit of food? We only export tobacco and cotton because we can't add value, which is something that is very, very simple, but we can't add value. We export them as raw material. And you look at our farmers, what we give them in return of their labor. We don't give them 100% of the value of what they've contributed. Actually, we cheat them. We cheat our farmers who grow tobacco. We cheat our farmers who grow cotton on the pretext that we give them free seed. So it is us who is shortchanging our own people, claiming we have given you free seed, so we decide how we are going to market and what we are going to give you in terms of the payment out of that cotton. So can you explain this correlation, which I don't see the actual correlation between what we say is the 17%, the contribution. Industry is 11%. Whichever country have you ever seen that it develops without industry? Whichever country have you ever seen growing that doesn't employ its own people in manufacturing? On the issue of our partners in Zimbabwe, you go to our budget statement. Most of our trade, the people who even support us in terms of financing, they are all Western countries. You talk of all the European countries, they are all included. But when we want it to suit us, we talk of sanctions. The only country that really has sanctions against Zimbabwe, which we can talk of, which is bilateral, it's America. What program do we have? But I think the foreign minister has always said he has a program to do with it, and there are certain conditions that they want us to meet. Can we continuously cry without engaging seriously and say, this is how we are going to do it? We have always admitted that we have reforms that we have to undertake as Zimbabwe. When are we going to start to say we own up to what we have already agreed to deal with? An example is of Iran, which has been attacked twice by America this time around. But because they think that Biden is coming up, they are not retaliating because strategically they want to put themselves in a position where they can survive and negotiate. How are we, and this I want Dr. Chitambara and Vince to deal with that, because we seem not to be serious about what we say. And lastly, TSP didn't perform at all. What's our benchmark to say this is where we want to go? The Minister of Finance hasn't admitted that TSP was a failure. But all the presenters, you are in agreement, including the first one, that TSP didn't perform. How then can we move forward without admitting the faults that we had in the TSP?
Thank you. I think for now, let's get some responses and we'll come for another round. Thank you very much. I hope you were noting the questions as they come. Dr. Chitambara, quite a number of questions came to you from Honorable from Boera. and also Honorable Madzimure. I think those were targeted at you, and the other one was at Vince. Thank you.
Okay. I thought since I have more, I could end.
What do you want to end? Yeah, okay.
Let me deal with
You deal with the Vince.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to Williams and then maybe to you, sir, on the issue of sanctions. If you read Zidera, it clearly says that financial transactions or financial aid to Zimbabwe can be vetoed by the United States from the international financial organizations such as AFDB, IMF, and whatever. So there's no significant financial transaction that can happen, right, when it comes to developmental issues, as long as the sanctions are there. So clearly, we can't get access to, as a country, you can't get access to credit facilities, offshore credit facilities, because kana yapashika pa board, kana paine ma America, vanotobva vaisitopa kuti iri kuenda kuZimbabwe, saka we are not going to do it. No economist wants sanctions. Let's be very clear. Sanctions are bad for all of us. Let's forget the political rhetoric, because it means kuti mari yatinoda kuti uye munyika ichauya, so that we can prosper. So, you know, that is the issue with sanctions. But Williams always also say, kuti, your attitude is the problem. The problem is not the problem. Your attitude to the problem is the problem. Do you see what I'm saying? If you remember Ian Smith and whatever, they were under significant sanctions. And they went on a massive import substitution policy so that they could stop what? Having to be dependent on major imports. And because of that, they actually built Sables Chemicals. NRZ, the line to Baitbridge was built chop, in order to ensure that trade in nowhere as quickly. Do you see what I'm saying? So there was a positive reaction to a problem, not to use the problem as the excuse of doing nothing. And I think our politicians have got a tendency to use it as an excuse of doing nothing. It should be an opportunity of actually internal focus and internal development. That's on the issue of sanctions. My brother, every economy has been protected to somewhat to get where it gets. If you look at the subsidies, American farmers, right? So they can produce food here, food world, can America aid, and it's American food, US aid. America, and it keeps American farmers what? In business, right? So every country needs to protect its own. So what we need to do, we've got a list of all the products that we're importing, about 60 products that we can produce locally. Sakatutanga kuta, all right, let's put protection from imports so that we can facilitate local development. It might be painful, right? But at the end of the day, every country that has replaced imports has gone through protection. And if you go to every country today, there are products that they protect competition so that they can keep jobs and protect local industry. So that's what we need to do with these engineers and whatever, so that it's viable, because there's no point producing a toothpick for $2. Yo, the 2 cents from China. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's a kind of, that's as far as I'm concerned. Thanks.
There was a question which was posed by Honorable Stolle, saying we have a lot of these engineers around, but there's nothing basic which we have seen. And I think that's the question, isn't it? We haven't seen anything which our engineers, what's wrong? They are not producing anything. There is no innovation. I think that's the question.
I don't think you want to blame the engineers, because everything is a result of an environment that we're in. The first thing, for me, number one, the issue of protection of patents, right? In Zimbabwe, we don't have that. We haven't resolved that issue. So that if you look at, for example, the developed countries, innovation is fed when your ideas are protected, so that you can actually introduce new ideas into the market. That's the first thing. To me, the second thing is about access to funds and capital. And then third is access to markets. If you got those two things, then you can start producing locally. We have a highly monopolistic economy. Look at the food sector. how INSCO owns every other company. We've got one company that does all our beverages. Can you believe it? So the structure of the economy does not actually support the small guy to start something reasonable. And so it's a holistic view. We have to look at multiple factors that actually stop us from actually utilizing these skills.
Thank you. There was a question directed
Yeah,
to
there's a question in regards to mining. Mining is, from Honorable, mining is a very critical pillar of our economy. And I think what we need to do as a country right now is for us to join the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Because once we become a member of EITI, there is going to be transparency in the issuance, first and foremost, in the issuance of mining licenses. So mining licenses are not going to be issued to people who do not have money. They are going to be issued to serious investors who will be able to buy that big machinery in order for them to mine and bring money out of underground. And there's going to be transparency in the mining of those minerals so that we know how much has been mined. There's going to be transparency in the selling of those minerals so that we know how much our minerals have been sold for. And there's going to be transparency in the use of the money so that the money is plowed back to the communities. So what we need to do right now is to belong to EITI, and we are going to be pushing for it as the Budget and Finance. APNAC is also going to be pushing for that, and everybody else must push for that. This is going to assist us as a country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello?
I think there's, I know. You asked about where is the money going to come from for this huge thing since we've got sanctions. My brother, let me tell you something. There is $3 trillion in the world economy that is looking for deals. Mari yakagara ku bank overseas earning 6% in a bank is losing value. These people are looking for investments all over the world. The issue is about packaging. How do we package? What do you think when DIDG comes, diaspora group, rochitakuda kuisa mari mu NRZ, mukanzura diri racho. Vakuda kuita, vatsvaga mari, mutavana. Do you see what I'm saying? What does it look when you have a deal with NRZ, with a Zisco? Last minute, rokanzurwa. Do you see what I'm saying? Those are the things that are stopping investors. Because money is hungry where the return is high. And we have serious opportunities where people can get good returns more than the 6% you are going to bank in US dollars in Zimbabwe. But it's the issue of governance that is stopping this money coming to us. It's not the issue kuti hakuna mari.
The innovation capacity of any country is a function of investments in research and development. So I think it's really a question of incentives. When you look at how much we are spending in terms of research and development, we are at around 0.03% of GDP, yet the regional benchmark is, the international benchmark rather is at about 0.7% of GDP. So we are not spending enough in terms of research and development. And obviously that then also affects even our innovation capacity, how much maybe scholarly papers or articles, inventions emerge and come out of Zimbabwe. So I think it's just as simple as that. It's about economic incentives. When you go to South Africa, the South African government actually invests a lot of resources in innovation, research and development, even at universities. When you publish a paper in South Africa in a top journal, you actually get, I think, about 15,000 rands as an incentive. And it's across all the different sectors, whether it's at university, at tertiary level, and so forth and so on. So I think we need to do something about our research and development spending as a way of enhancing innovation. Then the issue of sanctions, so yes, I agree, sanctions do affect us. But I think for me, sanctions are an opportunity also to, like Vince said, to enhance our local capacity through import substitution industrialization. We saw it. Zimbabwe is not the only country that's under sanctions. You know, even right now, China and Russia are under US sanctions. But of course, they've also retaliated. Zimbabwe being a small economy, a small and closed economy, we can't really effectively retaliate. And anyway, it's not in our best interest to retaliate. But countries can still prosper in spite of sanctions. I think we saw it under Rhodesia. Rhodesia was under a UN embargo for probably close to 15 years. But in spite of that embargo, they were able to build a strong and well-diversified industrial sector, which was actually number 2 in sub-Saharan Africa after apartheid South Africa. And even when you look at our macroeconomic aggregates in 1980, they were even much stronger than those of any other African country. Apartheid South Africa also did well under sanctions. Cuba is doing well. Cuba has been under a US embargo for close to 60 years. But they've actually been able to develop a strong social welfare, a developmental social welfare state. They've been investing in education, in healthcare. Even in Zimbabwe, we are benefiting from Cuban doctors that are coming here, Cuban nurses, and we're even sending some of our students to learn in Cuba, not just Zimbabwe, but most African countries are actually doing that. So yes, sanctions do affect us, but we can still prosper in spite. Ultimately, it's all about the mindset, the renewal of the mindset, like the Bible says. Then TSP did not perform. Yeah, so in TSP, in terms of the broad targets, the 3 broad targets that were set under TSP, I think our only success was in one broad category, which is the government fiscal position and the current account position. But again, that achievement was on the basis of austerity, the cutbacks that we saw in terms of critical infrastructure and social spending. But in terms of our economic targets, in terms of our inflation targets, we actually missed that. Yes, we had a surplus, a fiscal surplus, a current account surplus, but I think the challenge now is to ensure that we ring-fence these surpluses towards critical sectors so at least we enhance the welfare and the well-being of Zimbabweans. For me, I've always argued that I would rather, if I were the Minister of Finance, I would rather incur a deficit while financing healthcare, while financing critical social sectors or even capital sectors that enhance productivity and also have a significant effect on poverty reduction. So a deficit is not, it's not too bad. Most countries are incurring deficits, but really how you finance it and what you are using that expenditure overrun for determines its sustainability. Then the other question was on the private sector-led economy. I think my major concern when you talk about the private sector-led economy, in most African countries, what we have seen is that the focus really is on probably incentivizing big corporates. Even when you look at some of the incentives that are being offered to foreign investors, for example, these are the big mining conglomerates that are coming in to invest in the extractives. And investments in the extractive sector does not enhance, it does not create a lot of jobs because it's highly capital intensive. And it also creates enclave economies. So I think that's one of the major reasons why when you look at FDI investments into most African economies, including Zimbabwe, there's had different outcomes from FDI that's been going to countries like China. Why? Because in Africa, most of the FDI is coming into the extractive sectors. So it's creating enclaves. It's not creating enough jobs. It's not contributing to, there's a lot of illicit financial flows also associated with huge investments in the extractive sector. So for me, when you talk about the private sector-led economy, we need to be capacitating the small to medium enterprises, the SMEs. But the World Bank, the studies by the World Bank have actually shown that it's the SMEs that have the greatest impact of creating employment opportunities and also of creating sustainable development. And we saw it even in China. China, through the direct and strategic approach of supporting the township and village enterprises, which is the Chinese equivalent of the SMEs, they were actually able to, I think by 2008, these township and village enterprises were contributing as much as 45% to the Chinese total output or gross domestic product. So when you talk about private sector-led, we need to make sure that we are emphasizing capacitating the local small to medium enterprises as a way of ensuring that at least development becomes more sustainable and you create more employment opportunities. Oh, you want to add on that? Oh, yeah. Then the budget figures in terms of our revenues, yeah, I think it can be achieved. Remember, the first 3 months of the year we were affected by the lockdowns, so economic activity was really subdued. But now that we have opened up the economy, I think we are beginning to see that there's an improvement in capacity utilization. There's an improvement even in local availability of products in the shelves. So that could help to increase revenues, I think, for the last quarter of the year. But so it's possible, but the jury is still out. We'll wait and see whether we'll be able to achieve that.
Are you nearly through? Because our time. Yeah, just be brief. And
I think the other one was on agriculture. Maybe let me leave to Vince and others.
just 1 minute. No,
Okay, 1 minute, 30 seconds. On the issue of private sector-led growth, let us be very clear. It's rhetoric. Because you must understand the psychology behind power in Zimbabwe, right? It has always been the politicians against the private sector, right? They are scared, kuti mukaita mari too much, you become too powerful for them. So they control the private sector and they give to their loyal companies and businesses, right? But kuti private sector igarise the minister pasi kuti zvamuri kuita hatisi kuzvida, which is what happened in normal economies. It's the private sector that determines the budget. It's the private sector that determines what is going on. But here, it's upside down. So up to now, it's just political rhetoric.
I don't think I have many questions. I just have one. Vince, I was talking about equalization in the distribution of devolution resources. Mukoma kuda chirungu chandinzvenga, but ndanichireva kuti allocation anzi ichawana Manicaland ichapuwa 321 billion, Harare ipuwa 168. As the year goes from January to December, tasvika pana September, iyo Manicaland yaka-allocatiwa 321 billion, and it yanga yapiwa 93 billion only. Then Harare yakapuwa 168, yatowapa 101. Muruvaona. Saka kana tichipama 20% of whatever you allocate as the amount that is real, that is okay for that province. Ngatichingopama 20% iwayo, kwete kuti inotori neshoma yatowapa 101, iyi yakapiwa yakawanda yatowapa 93, iri pa 93 is the year process. That's what I wanted to, that's what I failed to express maybe by then. Then there's a question that came from MP from Ziwaresekwa that related to the military and their involvement in the economy. It might not be a very bad thing if the military is in the economy, but let us define their jurisdiction, what do they have to do, and let us formalize it. We don't need to see the army without there being some framework that guides the manner in which they should be involved in the economy. I think if we make it so clear, then we don't have to ask any questions, and we know where they start from and where they end, where they I think those are my responses for now. Thank you very much.
Now we have 10 minutes and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because we have to finish by 1:45. Honorables, you are going to Parliament today, isn't it? Okay. So please don't make, I don't know what to do. Just 1 point so that I'll give you just a minute for each so that we summarize. Okay. I'll start with Masimba. Please give him the mic. Okay. Just 1 minute.
All right. In 1 minute, can I say 2 points? The first one is an appeal to the members of parliament in the spirit of practicality. When you look at the allocation to disability in the budget, it's 140 million for social protection, which may or may not be enough. Actually, it's not enough. But the point is, when you look at the allocations, you have allocations for empowerment, you have allocations for tax credits. The appeal is that the minister considers also bringing people with disabilities into the empowerment realm, separately allocating the money, also considering the tax credits to employers who employ, say, people with disabilities. So the appeal to members of parliament is that you then go and also ask the minister to do that in the same way that you make him not sleep during the night as you demand your vehicles and others, your welfare issues. So that's the appeal. The question to Vince is this. Sidera says America can, and probably therefore this becomes semantics. Have we had a situation where money has been vetoed by an American board member in some of these organizations that you reference?
Thank you. Okay, the gentleman.
Yeah, my first question is...
No, you only have one question. We don't have much time. Just identify yourself and just come up with one question.
It never rained, but poured. My name is Frederick Maguraminga from Zimbabwe Union of Drivers and Conductors. I'm saying transport issue dominates people's lives. And we are talking about ordinary citizens who voted for you in office. So right now, they don't have transport. And we don't have a transport system. And we are putting our focus on big brothers in transport. The taxation issue is actually reflected. Buses, how they are being taxed, how they are being exonerated from duty. How many youth do we have in the public transport system? And we are talking about 67.7% youth. What is it that we have done for them for the past 8 months? No unemployment benefit. So my question is, what are we going to do with this non-compliance in social COVID regulations because of lack of transport? Do we have to continue to blame a windy and reduce it to be a discussion of a windy, other than coming up with a policy that where a ministry cannot put its own mandate in the budgetary issues? One ministry cannot control transport. We need to see transport being treated as transport through a stakeholder arrangement. Lastly, we are talking about disaster preparedness. I'm not talking about a blind person. I'm not talking about a disabled person. But I'm talking about MPs or celebrities being involved in an accident. Are they receiving treatment? If they are not, are we sure that as ordinary Zimbabweans, do we have a budget that is actually addressing the disaster preparedness of a nation? Maybe I can end here, but this is not the end of it.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. My question is just directed to the Portfolio Committee. We understand the history of the various line ministries being behind in terms of their audited accounts. What is the situation at the moment, and what is the committee doing in rectifying that? Because why I'm asking this is, we cannot monitor the national budget without the line ministries themselves being clean in the first place. And to what extent would the Portfolio Committee be of assistance to organizations like Zimcod when it comes to the monitoring of the national budget and the line ministries? Thank you.
Thank you. Wamanyanya, just 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a small appeal to our MPs. My name is Masimba Manyanya. I am from Simkai Trust, Goromonzi. I work with Zimcod. Now, this is an appeal to our MPs to note that I think the budget belongs in a historical context, and there are very important lessons we are getting from 3 years back when we had the tractor mechanization scheme. Our public finances do tell a story, a very important story to do with governance, especially political governance. And $1.3 billion was transferred onto the back of innocent taxpayers when that money can actually not be accounted for or repaid back to the Reserve Bank. Thank you.
I really want to take a leaf of what is in the budget currently, whereby we have got 250 million, which is going to the Youth Empower Bank, which we believe is actually supposed to be financing programs for the young people. However, I'm saying that we know that banks have got certain thresholds that they need to be having, which is 5 million, which we are saying that each and every bank has to be having 5 million. But if you're going to use even the interbank rate, you'll find out that that 250 million that has been given to Empower Bank is insufficient for that bank to be actually a recognized bank with others. So what it means is that that bank will actually not be able to compete with any other. So there is need for that bank to be allocated money which is equivalent enough for it at least to be having that 5 million threshold, which RBZ is requesting for. The other issue that I thought also is also worth reckoning within the budget as well is that I think we really need for, there was a presenter who talked about institutional reforms that need to be done. And I think what is very, very pertinent and very important is for us to be able to exercise our oversight role, is for us to be having a predictability of resources mechanism. We are having a challenge whereby ministries are being allocated money which is insufficient. So what is very important is for them to be knowing what resources have to be coming to them and at what juncture. Because if ever they are going to be getting resources which are not, without any possible plan that is there, what will end up happening is that they will just be given amounts or any amount that they will not have planned for. So in that way, that means that they won't be able to really effectively do whatever that they would have wanted in the budget. The other issue that I also thought is also important is the issue of procurement issues. I understand there was a time that the Ministry of Education went on and said that they were allocated 67 million last budget, but then as of 30 June 2019, they were saying that they were not able to dispose of that money. They only, as of 30 June, they were saying they disposed 33 million. The reason was because there were no procurement committees that were set up in ministries. So what I think is also pertinent is for us to be able to set up for the budget, then to be able to have a budget which is set for procurement committees within ministries, so that at least there is implementation of social service delivery. Because as it stands now, if there is no procurement, we have money being allocated to ministries, but then it won't be disbursed because there is not that such a mechanism. The other issue that I thought also is also important is for all ministries, it's also important for them to be having targeted interventions. Considering the little resources that they have, it's also important for them to be also concentrating on their priority areas, on those areas or those projects that I think are supposed to be having a greatest impact to the people. In this way, I'm sure we'll be able to do service delivery, which I think is also important. Going back to the issue of young people, truly speaking, we want to thank and appreciate the Honorable Minister for the 37.5 million that he put which he is saying that is supposed to go towards national venture capital, which is an addition from the 500 million. I know there was one person who once said on the presenters, we said we don't know what amount it is. Truly speaking, what it means is that we've got 500 million, which is said to the young people on the national venture. And then there's that addition of 37.5, which is going to the youth, 37.5 million, which is going to the women, 37.5, which is going to the war veterans. We appreciate that. But we're saying, looking at the demographic dividend of young people, we really are looking forward for an increase in that amount, because when we're going to translate that, truly speaking, it means that we are not going to achieve economic emancipation to the young people of Zimbabwe. So we really were calling upon to the ministry to really have a closer look when it comes to issues of the young people. Truly speaking, we don't want to lie. The budget, we appreciate what they've done, but we expect more so that at least youth issues can be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable. To let you finish, although our time is up, but I really appreciate the issue of the youth. It's critical. Thank you. Panelists, if there's anyone want to make a comment? No?
Thank you very much. I think a number of issues were to do with comments, observations.
Sure.
And I really want to thank the participants for the zeal that some of them were demonstrating. But maybe to start with Brother Kuchera Masimba, the issue of tax credits to companies, especially those who actually employ people with disabilities. If you go through our report, it was one of our recommendations in our committee report. And we also want to take it up as we then debate the budget this coming week. So we can assure you that we are on it as a committee. But like I indicated, that the onus is with the minister at the end of the day to take on board some of the recommendations. And what we can only do is to push as a committee. And we are sharing that sentiment to actually advocate for such tax incentives when it comes to people with disabilities. And I want to thank you very much for raising that. Brother Frederick, you were very passionate about the transport sector. If you also go through the committee report, we advocated for a vibrant Zimcod, and also trying to analyze whether the issue of subsidies is helping, whether there can be funds allocated towards the procurement of more buses, so that will not have the issues to do with challenges being faced in that transport sector. And Sorry, you can allow me to what we then speak. We don't speak our minds, but we speak the minds that come from the people. So as we go around, we solicit for views. What we can only do now is to consolidate. But however, there are dissenting voices in any gathering, where the majority will then have a saying to say, yes, we need more buses. But I do concur with what you are saying, that at times it might not be ideal, but what we then table is not the individual mind, but what the majority have said. So I thought maybe I'll just highlight that, and which can be a debate for another day, to say, can we have more buses or we cannot have more buses? Can we have private players in the industry? Or we have got very vibrant transport system? But you are allowed to air your views as a citizen. And also I wanted to talk about the issue of audit reports. True, there's no way we can continue having budgets without interrogating how the other ministries have been failing. And in other jurisdictions, if you don't report favorably on your performance, there might be punitive measures where you are not allocated more funds because you would have failed to account how you have utilized the funds that have been allocated to you within the previous budget. So I do agree with you that yes, unfortunately the Auditor General this year was affected because of the pandemic, but normally she's on time to table reports, which we are supposed to interrogate as committees, and in particular, a committee on public accounts. You also talked about the issue of monitoring of budgets, which is very true. Like I indicated that, yes, we now need to move with speed and come up with a tool where we start tracking soon after approval of the budget, where the funds are being disbursed accordingly, and the performance, where the funds are being channeled to the relevant line ministry and to the desired intention of such allocations. There was the issue of presumptive tax from Wachukukwa, which you think quite punitive. And however, you then mentioned the issue of collateral security. And I think one tried to address the issue of collateral security. Being a banker myself, is one of the issues that everyone will say in the but banks are not interested in collateral security. That comes last on their evaluation process. The performance to transact, your cash flows will speak to the bank, whether you'll be in a position to repay, to generate more revenue, and to service the obligation that you would have taken on board. So I think those are some of the issues that we also need to do, and you are right, the cost of data is very expensive. We've witnessed, especially during this pandemic, that even our kids who are in different schools are actually finding it very difficult to connect online because of cost of data. And simplified tax system, yes, you were very right. We also need that so that some of the taxes are harmonized, whereby we would not have a number of taxes which might then hinder and also discourage those who want to invest in this beautiful nation to come on board. And the role of Parliament, Prince, you were very vibrant and you showed a lot of zeal as a youth. But I also pose it to yourselves that youth, even if we go around soliciting for views, you rarely find youth. But ukati bora unoona vese vachiuya. So I wonder at times when there are national programs, my youth acha abude. And asina kubuda wadaro kunoya nana mbuya, then they say their views. After the budget, my youth ayobuda otakasiwa. I'm not saying those are wakaita Prince, but I'm just telling you that it's also high time that you must push as youth, be involved, so that politics are but are you coming to defend your position? So I thought you are very right, yes. For posterity, you are supposed to be there and know that the programs must also take you on board, but be also part of the system and play your part. Thank you very much.
I think we have come to the end of our program. I really enjoyed being a facilitator, and I think our program went well. Before I ask our chairman of Zimcod to give his closing remarks, there was a section where it says way forward. What is the way forward? Can I just make a proposal, or if there's anyone who has how we should move forward? But my thinking is there is a thread which has been coming since the start of the debate, the issue of tracking system, that the whole budgetary process does not, it starts from now. And I think, the Honorable, you mentioned the issue of either quarterly and so forth. That framework of coming up with a tracking system, I think is very critical. That's what I would consider as a way forward, myself, going forward. Unless someone has got one other way forward, he thinks. Otherwise, I thank you very much for attending, and at this stage, I ask the board chairman of Zimcod, Mukasiri Sibanda, to come forward and give us closing remarks. Thank you. But one apology in terms of women, it's not deliberate. Up to last night, I was trying to find if I can get more female, especially economists, to be part of the panel. And we are still in a process of getting more of our women to really participate. They are the majority, they are 52%. So if you have any women who are keen, who can also participate, I have a column which I coordinate in the Zimbabwe Independent every week. And I ask for people to come up with, opinion pieces, critical issues, which will assist our nation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've reached the end of our discussion. And let me start by thanking the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Budget, Finance and Economic Development, Honorable Mona. He's a brother to me, so I'm very comfortable each time when I mention his name. All the members of parliament here present and everyone else, you are quite important to this conversation, including the panel here that gave very insightful and granularized views in terms of how we can move forward to ensure that the budget can be a key lever for the development that we want. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because the key details have been shared here. But I just wanted to make emphasis on one area that I'm very passionate about, and for the right reasons, that our minerals, as we speak right now, are the only backbone that we have if we are to turn around our economy. So what does it mean? It means that focusing on governance processes that can avoid a situation whereby the poor gets poorer and the rich gets richer, accumulate more wealth, is very, very important. So let's look at this budget. If we are saying 12 billion budget, if we are saying 12 billion target by 2023, what is the fiscal target in terms of the tax revenue to finance development? I'm not worried about whether we are going to realize 12 billion or not, because I'm not a miner, I'm not too technical, but I want to know what is at stake for development processes, number one. Number two, do we know even from the budget that we have, how much is contributed from the mining sector? Is that clear? Number three, of course, when you do a further engagement, for instance, with Zimra, Commissioner General, we are told that 25% of the tax revenue that they are collecting, which is the top which is the top contributor, comes from the mining sector, and of that, about 17% are royalties. We missed opportunities to renegotiate our agreements in the platinum sector, for instance. The 25-year stabilization agreement, I'm not going to mention the company and those that are enjoying it, and it was supposed to be reviewed by August 2019, and that again is a commitment that was made by the budget for the 2019 national budget. We are silent on it. Record-breaking revenues declared for platinum companies, Zimplats, your Mimosa, but are we seeing any bumper revenue coming in, especially from the royalties? But just to conclude, there are some things that we should pay attention to. Number one, all the deals that are mining deals that are currently performing and those that are being negotiated. We have an Act of Parliament. We have got a constitution which is very clear that Parliament must have oversight. So we can't talk about any fiscal linkages from our mining sector if the Parliament here is not having an oversight role in terms of the terms and conditions that govern how payments should be made to government from the mining sector. So I think for me that's a deal breaker, that must be moved. We must look at it urgently. Number two, we need to have beneficial ownership disclosure. There are a lot of challenges. Who is getting EPOs? Who are the, you know, Mr. Chitando, I don't want to attack him, but he is a man from the private sector. And obviously, there should be private interest. But with the beneficial ownership disclosure, we are very clear to what extent is he entangled in some of the deals. I'm giving him as an example, but it's not limited. I'm giving him as an example, it's not limited. To what extent are public officials that are also involved in terms of oversight role or negotiating these deals are also entangled in terms of their commercial interest? That has to come clearly, and this is why you have some even speaking that the president is involved in the gold sector, whether right or not, but the issue of beneficial ownership disclosure is very critical to ensure that there's greater transparency and accountability in the sector. Then lastly, the issue of tax incentives. In 2015 alone, about 100 million US dollars was refunded to a mining company just to honor a stabilization agreement. Are we clear in terms of the financial modeling? What is the cost of tax incentives that we are going to give to achieve to 12 billion? And what is the benefit that is going to come? I think that's one area that also I think is very important to press on. Let me thank you all for this robust conversation. And we hope, you know, we keep on talking and let's not give up. It's not easy to change processes, but sometimes when the mentality is constantly challenged and we come together as a collective to share different viewpoints and always to find a common interest in terms of how the future of this country should be shaped, this is how we can move forward. Thank you.